Welcome to part 2 of my Ruy Lopez trap series. The Ruy Lopez, with its complex and deep strategy, is also a perfect minefield for cunning and brutal traps. In the first video, we looked at the Noah's Ark, Mortimer, and fishing pole traps. If you have not seen that video, check it out. Now let's get into some traps. The first trap we will look at comes from the open variation of the Ruy Lopez. Now we have a6 by black, known as the Morphy defense. Play continues with bishop a4, knight f6, castles kingside, and the signature move of the open variation, which is knight takes e4 on move 5. By playing knight takes e4, black challenges white's central control immediately, accepting a temporary material advantage and inviting a sharp, tactical game. White's main response is usually d4, immediately opening the center and trying to exploit black's lack of development. Next we have b5, bishop b3. Black now plays d5, and now white can get back the central pawn by taking on e5. In this position, we can see that there is a vulnerable pawn on d5, which is attacked by both the white bishop on b3 and the white queen on d1, but only defended once by the black queen on d8. So the most common and logical move for black is to play bishop to e6 to defend the pawn. White now plays c3, which provides an escape square for the light-squared bishop in case the black knight attacks it from a5. Black now plays bishop e7, getting ready to castle, and white plays rook to e1. Castling is now played, followed by the white knight centralizing itself on d4. Let's stop for a moment and examine the position. Here we notice that white's centralized knight is attacking black's undefended knight on c6. Black's best reply is to either capture the loose pawn on e5 or the white knight on d4. However, here there is a natural-looking move to defend this knight, which is queen to d7. This move defends both minor pieces. It seems like a very logical continuation. However, although it looks good on the surface, there is an issue with this move which white can exploit. What do you think white plays in this position? Here white plays the amazing move, knight takes bishop on e6. This is known as the Tarrasch trap. Here we can see that black can take this knight with either the queen on d7 or the pawn on f7. Let's look at the consequences of each scenario. If black takes with the pawn, what do you think white will play? Here white plays the amazing move rook captures knight on e4, sacrificing the rook! The black queen on d7 is actually X-ray attacked by the white queen on d1. The pawn acts as a temporary shield for the moment. Therefore, if it captures the rook, it doesn't shield the black queen anymore, leaving it vulnerable to capture by the white queen. It's game over for black. Now let's go back. Instead of taking with the pawn, if black were to take with the queen instead, we get the same move again with the rook. However, in this scenario, it is the white bishop, which is X-ray, attacking the black queen. Again, the pawn acts as a shield. Therefore, similar to the previous scenario, if the pawn captures the rook, the black queen is now vulnerable to capture by the white bishop. So d takes e4 cannot be played. In both scenarios, the pawn acts as a shield and so cannot capture the rook. White remains a full piece ahead. Now let us go back to the Ruy Lopez start position. In this position, black can play the move f5. The move f5 immediately launches a counterattack on the center, often leading to a sacrifice of a pawn. This is known as the Schliemann Gambit, or Schliemann defense. It was first played by Karl Jenisch in 1847, but later named after Adolf Karl Wilhelm Schliemann. So sometimes you'll also see it referred to as the Jenisch Gambit, or Schliemann-Jenisch Gambit. This is a very aggressive response by black. Here there are many traps to avoid. Let's have a look at some of these. If white decides to capture on f5, black immediately pushes the pawn, attacking the knight on f3. In this position, we can see that the knight does not have a good square to go to. It cannot go to h4 or g5 because the queen attacks these squares, and e5 and d4 are attacked by the knight. So all it can really do is retreat back to the start position and undevelop, which doesn't seem ideal. Many players here will try to first trade the black knight on c6 for the white bishop, and after black recaptures, they can save their knight. In this position, a good move is queen to f6, which attacks the knight, and if it moves, we can pick up the pawn. It is very easy for white to go wrong here. For example, a natural-looking move would be to defend the knight by playing pawn to c3. However, this gives black a decisive advantage. What do you think black plays in this position? Here black plays the powerful move bishop to a6. This move attacks f1, preventing the white king from castling, and at the same time the black bishop attacks d3 along with the pawn, so white cannot move their pawn to d3. It's just a very awkward position for white. Black will next play c5 to kick the knight away. Just a terrible scenario for white. Now, instead of defending this knight, a lot of players would be tempted to play queen to h5, giving a check to the king. Here, white is completely lost after the move g6. After a pawn trade on g6, we can see that the queen and knight are attacked at the same time. There is no way to save them both. Here, the most logical move is for the queen to go to either e2, in which case we will just capture the knight, or they can go to g4, threatening a counterattack, if we take the knight on d4. Here is an example line of how quickly black can crush this position and dominate white. White's king is extremely vulnerable, and there is a serious lack of development from white. Going back to the start position of the Schliemann gambit, sometimes white decides not to take this pawn, but instead win a pawn by taking the knight first with the bishop. And after black recaptures, white simply takes the loose pawn on e5. However, here black can play the move queen to d4, forking the pawn and the knight. The best move for white here is to play knight to f3, giving up the pawn on e4. However, less experienced players will try to give a check on h5. As we can see by the evaluation bar, this massively favours black. After black blocks the check with pawn to g6, we can see that both the knight and queen are under attack. Here white will take the pawn on g6 to stop the threat on the queen, and at the same time the white knight attacks black's rook in the corner on h8. Also, white's queen is X-ray attacking the black rook, and the pawn on h7 is pinned to the rook. White assumes this knight is safe and cannot be captured, but here black captures the knight anyway. The best move is to take the loose pawn on g6 and give a check. However, it is common for even strong players to take the rook on h8, as they assumed the white knight cannot be captured. However, they have forgotten that this rook is defended by the queen on d4, and so cannot be taken. The queen on d4 is sometimes invisible. Try this out for yourself, and see if they take on h8. This will be fun to experiment with, particularly under faster time controls. Now if black plays the correct move by capturing the pawn and delivering a check, black is still massively advantaged. Here black's king is completely safe despite losing castling rights. A sample continuation shows black gaining a lot of tempo, whilst white is still underdeveloped. Now going back to the start, let's suppose white doesn't capture, but instead defends the pawn on e4 by playing pawn to d3. This is one of the main responses. White can also defend the pawn on e4 by playing knight to c3. We will look at this variation later. Here black can capture the pawn on e4, and after white recaptures, black plays knight to f6. The best response by white is to castle kingside. However, a lot of players will develop the knight to c3. Black can now immediately pin this knight to the king, creating a threat to capture the pawn on e4, which is no longer defended by the knight as it is pinned. Here the power of the pinned piece is illusionary. It doesn't actually defend the pawn. To break this pin, it is common for white to castle. Black should now immediately take this knight and damage white's pawn structure whilst creating a solid pawn structure for itself. Going back to this position, let's suppose white defends with the knight instead. Here black can take on e4, and after white recaptures, some players will be tempted by the move d5. Attacking the knight, white should ignore this threat and use the other knight to capture on e5. Black cannot capture this knight, as its own knight is pinned by the bishop. So here, black captures the knight on e4. For the moment it looks like black is up a piece, but this is only temporary as the white knight captures the black knight on c6. Let us stop and examine this position. White is ready to castle, and black's queen is attacked by the white knight. It is black's turn to play. What do you think black plays in this position? Here black plays the move queen to g5, forking the bishop and pawn. If we go back a move, for those of you who thought the pawn can take, this is actually a mistake because after the bishop recaptures checking the king, the rook is also attacked through a fork. And after bishop blocks on d7, allowing the queen to defend the rook, we have the immediate queen to h5 checking the king. And after the king moves, the queen delivers another check on e5. We lose the rook soon after, and the position falls apart for black. Therefore, in this position, the move queen to g5 is played. White should respond by playing queen to e2, defending the bishop and attacking the pawn on e4. Here the best move is knight to f6 to defend this pawn. It is tempting to take the pawn on g2, threatening the rook and also defending the pawn on e4. However, this is a mistake. This pawn is poison. How can white punish this mistake by black? Here white plays the move queen to h5, delivering a check. It is useful to look for forcing moves such as 1. Checks, 2. Captures, and 3. Threats or attacks, in that specific order. Now after black blocks the check, white can play queen to e5 check, forking the king and the rook. And after a move like knight e7, we have to be careful not to take the loose rook on h8 as our own rook is attacked. Let's stop and think about this position. Both queens are attacking the opposite rooks. Therefore, what is white's best move in this position? Here we don't need to save the rook immediately, but instead play an in-between move, also known as Zwischenzug in German. Here white can play knight takes e7, delivering a discovered check from the bishop. And after the king moves, we save our rook. Play can continue as follows. White is up a bishop, rook and pawn, and will quickly win soon after. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking around. Now it's time to test your understanding. The Tarrasch trap is a very strong trap for white in the Ruy Lopez's open variation. It relies on a tactical sequence involving sacrifice of which of the following pieces? A. Bishop, B. Knight, or C. Rook. Which variation from the Ruy Lopez is the following position from? A. Berlin defense, B. Schliemann defense, C. Janisch gambit, or D. Exchange variation. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That way you won't miss a thing. And be sure to leave a comment telling me what videos you'd like me to work on next. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.